understand and deliver.
What? My liver? No. I'm not just gonna stand here while you take my liver.
What? No, not your liver. I'm robbing you here, all right? Look, I got the knife and... Well, I guess this could be confused for a liver stealing knife, but no, I'm robbing you.
Oh, a robbery. Well, that sucks considerably less. I don't really got any money. What do you want?
Just give me all your sound blasters, all right?
Okay, here, you can have this.
All right, let me look at this. Hey, wait a second. This is one of them Sound Blaster 16 Vibras. This thing's a piece of junk.
No, the Vibra is a good card. This one's even got a OPL3 chip on it. It's not as bad as everybody says. Just please spare my life.
Look, if you say so, but I'm gonna need to see a video to see some proof, all right? So you better show me a video or I'm really gonna take your liver out, all right?
So you want to watch an entire video of a guy talking about how it's not so bad? I mean, I guess I can do that. The Sound Blaster 16, probably the most iconic Sound Blaster, at least in my opinion, and it's still a great card. You just plug it in and it works and everything sounds the way it should. It's an easy card and still something I would recommend if you want a legitimately good retro rig today. That said, when you're talking about a Sound Blaster 16, you could be talking about varyingly different cards. The early ones were very good and just compatible with everything. But as time went on, they innovated, I guess, on the product designs. Some of them were made cheaper, some of them were made better, and some of them were made worse. And while we're talking about worse, let's talk about the Sound Blaster Vibra 16. A lot of people really hate this card and consider it to be one of the worst Sound Blaster cards released on the Isobus. But is it really all that bad? Well, the answer to that question really lies in which one you get. Like most cards made by Creative Labs, the Vibra comes in a confusing variety of major and minor revisions that were marketed using the same name. The series of cards started around 1994, with many cards released on the Isobus, and ended with the Vibra 128, which was a PCI card. The ISA cards confusingly all used similar names, like the Vibra 16, 16S, 16C, 16CL, etc., with the typical CT naming scheme differentiating specific models, which is a system that Creative used forever, for some reason. Personally, I've always found this CT naming convention to be really annoying. If you've ever looked up Sound Blaster models, you'll know what I'm talking about here. Everything starts with CT, from the chip names to the whole entire card, and it just gets kind of confusing to know what you're talking about half the time. That aside, if you want to dip your toes in the Vibra pool, the earlier cards are probably the ones you want. I'm going to be testing two cards in a head-to-head comparison, and these two models should provide the best and worst this series of cards has to offer. First, we have the CT2800, which uses a Vibra S CT2504 chip, and then we have this OEM variant of the Vibra 16C with a CT2505 chip. So can you see what I mean now about the confusing model part? So for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to refer to them as the 16C and the 16S for the remainder of this video. Now, if you're a big nerd, you'll notice right off the bat the major difference between these two cards. The 16S base card has the original Yamaha OPL3 FM chip. Again, if you're a big nerd, you'll know that the Yamaha OPL chips is what gave the Sound Blaster lineup its signature sound. By contrast, on this 16C base card, the only chip of consequence you will find is the CT2505. Well, you will find more odd components on this particular card that I have here from Soundforte. This model actually has a full-blown FM radio built right in and has an antenna output on the back. Kind of weird, but it shouldn't affect our tests here. Here's a quick clip of it in action because I knew someone would ask.
Neighborhood Michigan Ford dealer, and the deals here knock it out of the park.
Anyway, What makes this card and all future Vibra models released afterwards different is Creative chose to integrate everything into a single embedded chip. So, the FM implementation here is Creative's own OPL3 emulation called CQM, or Creative Quadrature Modulation, if you want to be fancy. This embedded approach isn't too much different to what ESS was doing with their audio drive chips for years. Not only was it cheaper to produce, it also allowed easy integration into motherboards or potentially laptops for onboard audio. The problem is, CQM is generally considered a significant downgrade to OPL in terms of sound quality and accuracy. I have some personal thoughts on that, but we'll get to that later. One thing you should know if you want to add a Vibra card to your collection is that the features of these cards vary wildly. As I mentioned, this 16S card has a real OPL3 chip, but some of them opt for CQM instead. Both of these cards have a wavetable header as well, but that isn't a guaranteed feature either. I guess what I'm getting at here is pay close attention to the pictures if you're buying on eBay or something. If you want a card with an OPL chip, a wavetable header, or even an IDE interface, make sure it has it. With that out of the way, what is the install experience like? Between both cards, the installation is pretty much identical. It is not much different than that of a regular SB16 installation, and that is a very good thing. There's a reason Creative Labs were so popular. Their cards just freaking work when you plug them in. If you're on Windows 98 like I am, the drivers are detected in Windows automatically, but for DOS games, you should set the blaster variables in the AutoExec for max compatibility. If you're running a pure DOS or Windows 3.1 system, you can use the SB-PNP or AW32 driver package, and you should be up and running pretty quickly. So the installation was easy, but how bad or good are these cards? Compatibility-wise, it seems like both cards are up to par with any normal ISA SB16. Maybe there's a few exceptions I missed since I'm not testing everything, but any game I loaded seemed to work fine. Regarding the OPL3 based 16S, I feel like everything sounds as it should in terms of FM synthesis. As for the infamous CQM on the 16C card, I don't really mind it personally. While I do find it lacks note clarity and sounds harsher when compared directly to the real deal, I find it perfectly passable. If you're just casually playing DOS games without sticking your ear hole in the speakers to criticize it, I can see most being happy with it. That isn't to say some games don't sound a bit off, but I'm actually surprised how well Creative pulled off their OPL knockoff, especially considering how abominable their next generation Sound Blaster Live card would be in terms of FM. To be honest, the most offensive problem with both of these cards is not the FM, but the digital sound in DOS games. The 16C especially likes to clip audio. You would think adjusting the mixer settings would resolve this, but it still doesn't sound right to me no matter how much I tweak it. Not that Sound Blaster audio doesn't always sound a bit crunch-tastic, but there seems to be a bit more distortion than usual in some games. Although the 16C has a louder and overall less noisy output than the 16S, it has a strange omnipresent high-frequency hiss. I thought this may have been due to capacitor age or just a faulty card, but it unfortunately seems to be a well-documented issue online with this particular chip. It's not so bad with speakers, but I find it to be extremely noticeable in headphones, and for reference, my hearing isn't necessarily even all that great. So what's the final verdict then? I think if you can find a CT2800 like this with an OPL3 chip, you will have a good time. Would I pick it over older Creative SB models? No, but for the right price, I think it's a fine card. As for the CQM based cards, well, if you can get them cheap enough or have them lying around, I don't think they're the worst. They certainly aren't as horrific as some people make them out to be. Still, some of the later models do get considerably worse from what I've read though, so I would try to stick to the early ones like these cards if you can. If you really want to track one down, I would recommend looking at dosdays.co.uk and look at all the models there and avoid the ones that they mention are troublesome. In conclusion though, I realize my opinions are entirely subjective, which is why I've put together this sound comparison. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below when listening to them side by side.
Before we show the sound test, I just want to show you this list of lovely people who have perfectly intact livers. That may or may not be because they support me on Patreon and the YouTube member program. You too could have a perfectly safe liver if you maybe supported me on those platforms. But either way, you know, you're good. Let's get on to the sound tests.